Hi guys, we're going to read the News to You article about the messages on streets that have been popping up around the US right now. So people are painting huge murals on streets in US cities. The first mural was painted on June 5th in Washington, D.C. Some of the murals say Black Lives Matters. Some murals have other messages. Black lives mean people of color. People are painting these murals because they want leaders to make changes in government. The people think people of color are not treated fairly. They want people of color to be treated fairly. People are painting murals in cities, including Sacramento, California, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And Sacramento, California is actually our state capital too, so that's where a lot of our legal stuff happens. So that's probably why they picked Sacramento of all places. Okay. So people are painting streets in US cities. So we need to find our important words. So we're always going to circle people if that's who we are talking about. We're going to always circle anything that's capitalized, especially if it's a country, a city, a state, like a month, a day of the week, a name of a person, those types of things. So we're going to circle painting, streets, and cities. People are painting the message, Black Lives Matter. So we've already circled people, so I'm going to circle that again. And we've already circled painting, so I'm going to circle that one again. So now we're going to want to circle message, and then the words Black Lives Matter. And that's very important because that is that's just what they're painting on the streets. So, and it's the reason they're painting that is because of the Black Lives Matter movement. So that's a very important key word there. So people are painting other messages too. So remember, we've already circled people, painting, I don't know why my pen got weird there, and messages. And then we also want to circle other and two. So Black lives means people of color. So we're going to circle Black lives, mean, and then people of color. And people are painting streets because they want change. So we've already circled people and painting. So we're going to circle those, and then we're going to circle streets because they want and change. So we'll come down to the second page. I'll get my pen back up. Excuse me. The people want leaders to make changes in government. So we've already circled people. So we're going to circle want, leaders, make changes, and government. So that's, government is like what makes up our rules and our laws and those types of things. So the people think people of color are not treated fairly. So we're going to circle people, since we've already circled that, and we're going to circle think, people of color not treated fairly. So some of those things, when they're talking about not treated fairly, they could be talking about the way that because of how they look, they could be being stopped by the police more than somebody else. They usually are using the situation of, like, for example, the different protests or riots, whatever you want to call them, that have happened across the country the last few months with our shelter in place. So there were some protests that were happening because people wanted to be able to have their gyms open and their hair salons and go golfing and all of those things, which were predominantly white protests. And there was no real law enforcement presence that got violent. And so now they're, saying, but look at these other protests that are happening because of some of the deaths in our country, like of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, just to name a few, because if I named them all, I'd be here forever. And those protests, some of them have gotten pretty violent. And so, and they're talking about situations where sometimes if somebody gets pulled over for a DUI or a forged check, depending on the color of their skin, they might get treated differently by the police, especially maybe depending on their sex or their gender, how it's kind of hard to describe it. So, I might get treated differently if I get pulled over than, say, an African-American woman. That's part of their argument. And so that's where this is all coming. It can be hard to understand if you don't have if you're not reading a lot of what's going on and you don't know a lot of the history behind some of the stuff. So the people want people of color to be treated fairly. So we're going to circle people and people of color, because we've already circled those before, and then treated fairly. And then we also want to circle want. So they are painting streets in Washington, D.C., Sacramento, California, and Raleigh, North Carolina. So we're going to circle they, painting streets, because we've already circled those 3 words. And then we're going to circle these important places. So Washington, D.C., which is the United States Capitol. So that's where our White House is, where the president lives and all that. That's, you know, where our huge, like the Senate and the House for the entire country is and everything. Like it's a pretty big political place. So we have Sacramento, California, and we have Raleigh, North Carolina. So what are people painting in the US cities? Did we talk about people painting desks? No, not this time. Did we talk about people painting trees? That might be kind of hard depending on what kind of tree you're painting. But we did talk about people painting streets. So what do people who are painting streets want? Do they want music? I don't know. Did they want change or did they want cars? Well, they definitely did not want cars. And so remember, they're talking about people being treated fairly. So that's not really wanting, they don't want music. They want change for people to all be treated in a fair manner. And where are people painting streets? Are they painting them in Washington, D.C., Moscow, Russia, which is a whole other country? Remember, Washington, D.C. is in the United States. Or are they in Mexico City, Mexico? So remember, we were talking about the capital of the country, which is of the United States. So they are painting streets in Washington, D.C. All right, guys, you know, this is only kind of just like skimming the surface on this topic. Feel free to talk to your parents about it and ask them more about the movement and everything and stuff, because it's really important to be in the know on what's going on in our country. And this is a pretty big thing right now. So thanks, guys. You all did awesome. And I'm really proud of how you guys are handling all of our distance learning.